The Ant and the Grasshopper. In a beautiful green meadow there lived many insects. Among them were two very different creatures, an ant named Andy and a grasshopper named Gary. Andy the ant was small and brown. He worked very hard every day. Gary the grasshopper was big and green. He loved to play and sing all day long. It was summertime. The sun was bright and warm. Flowers were blooming everywhere. There was lots of food for all the insects. Every morning Andy woke up early. He left his small ant hill and went to look for food. He carried tiny pieces of leaves and seeds back to his home. It was hard work, but Andy didn't mind. He knew winter would come soon. Gary the grasshopper saw Andy working hard. He laughed and said, "Andy, why do you work so much? It's summer. The weather is nice, and there's plenty of food. Come play with me." Andy looked up at Gary and said, "I'm working now so I have food for winter. Winter is cold, and food is hard to find. You should work too, Gary." But Gary just laughed again. He said, "Winter is far away. I want to have fun now." Then he jumped away to play in the flowers. Days passed. Andy kept working hard. He woke up early every day and went to bed late every night. His small house in the ant hill was getting full of food. Gary spent his days playing and singing. He jumped from flower to flower. He sang songs to the other insects. He slept late and never worried about tomorrow. Sometimes Gary tried to get Andy to play. He would say, "Andy, come listen to my new song," or "Andy, let's go to the pond and watch the fish." But Andy always said no. He told Gary, "I have to keep working. Winter is coming, and I need more food." Gary thought Andy was silly. He said, "You worry too much. Live for today." Summer turned to fall. The days got shorter. The air got cooler. Leaves on the trees turned red and yellow. Andy worked even harder. He knew winter was coming soon. He gathered the last seeds and leaves he could find. His house was very full now. Gary was still playing, but it was harder to find other insects to play with. Many of them were busy like Andy, getting ready for winter. But Gary didn't worry. He kept jumping and singing. One day, Andy was carrying a big seed back to his hill. He saw Gary sitting on a leaf, looking sad. Andy asked, "Gary, are you okay? Why do you look sad?" Gary said, "It's getting cold, Andy, and I'm getting hungry. Many flowers are gone, and it's hard to find food. What should I do?" Andy felt sorry for Gary. He said, "Winter is almost here, Gary. You should have worked in the summer to save food. Now it might be too late." Gary started to cry. He said, "You were right, Andy. I should have listened to you. Now I'll be cold and hungry in the winter. What will I do?" Andy thought for a moment. He didn't want Gary to be sad. Andy said, "I have an idea. You can help me carry food now. If you work hard, maybe you can save a little food before winter comes." Gary was happy. He said, "Really?" "Oh, thank you, Andy. I'll work very hard, I promise." So Gary started to work with Andy. It was hard at first. Gary wasn't used to carrying heavy things. His legs got tired quickly, but he didn't give up. Every day, Gary worked with Andy that carried seeds and leaves together. Gary's small house began to fill up with food, too. As they worked, Andy taught Gary many things. He showed him how to find the best seeds. He taught him how to carry heavy things even when he was tired. Gary learned that work could be fun when you do it with a friend. Soon the first snow fell. The meadow was covered in white. It was very cold outside, but Andy and Gary were safe in their warm homes under the ground. All winter long, Andy and Gary stayed in their homes. They ate the food they had saved. Gary was very glad he had worked hard at the end of fall. He had enough food to last through the winter. Sometimes, Andy and Gary would visit each other. They would share stories and songs. Gary taught Andy some of his fun songs. Andy taught Gary how to keep his home clean and organized. Gary learned an important lesson that winter. He understood now why it was important to work and save for the future. He promised himself that next summer he would work hard like Andy. When spring came, the snow melted. Flowers started to bloom again. Andy and Gary came out of their homes. Gary looked at Andy and said, "Thank you for helping me, Andy. You're a true friend. This summer, I'm going to work hard like you." Andy smiled and said, "I'm glad you learned that lesson, Gary, but you taught me something too. You showed me that it's important to have fun sometimes. Maybe this summer we can work together and play together." Gary jumped with joy. He said, "That's a great idea. We'll be the hardest working and the happiest insects in the meadow." From that day on, Andy and Gary were the best of friends. They worked hard together every morning. In the afternoons, they played and sang together. They learned that life is best when you have a balance of work and play. All the other insects in the meadow saw how happy Andy and Gary were. They learned that it's important to work for the future, but it's also important to enjoy today. And they learned that the best way to live is to help each other and be good friends. The end.